Hey guys, so with the return of Gjallarhorn, a lot of you have been asking what weapon is better, Gjallarhorn or Sleeper Simulant? The answer is, it's complicated because it depends on the context. So let's talk about it. To me, the most important place to test stuff like damage and DPS is in the raid, since that's the most difficult content. Stuff like heroic strikes and nightfalls typically have modifiers on them that adjust the damage of certain things at certain times, and although the net results probably ends up being the same, that kind of stuff is typically steamrolled and doesn't require too much thinking. But we can sort of apply what we'll learn today into those activities if we want to. I used Vasek, the Arc Priest, as a sort of test model with a little bit of Axis as well, but Vasek was the main focus. To test the damage, I loaded up on a lot of heavy, popped Weapons of Light, shot the bosses, and wrote down a lot of numbers. So let's go take a look at those numbers. Vasek has a 20-second period where he is vulnerable, about 20 seconds. In this time, if you're using Sleeper Simulant, you are capable of getting 9 shots off, which is the default amount of ammo that the gun can hold with no bonuses. With Gjallarhorn, you can definitely get off 7 shots, but the default is 5, so you'll need 2 heavy ammo bonuses. Since that's not always available for everyone, I did this test with 6 rockets, which is still more than the default. My light level was 379, while both weapons were at 380. I used the raid gloves to provide all of my heavy, and a good chunk of the time I was able to completely fill up while using a heavy ammo synthesis if I could not. What I did not use was any sort of reload speed based bonus. Positioning is important for this encounter. To ideally position yourself, you want to be already in the middle, or wherever your team meets, when the bombs are in the air so that you can start damage right away. If you're not throwing a bomb, then this is really easy. If you are throwing a bomb, then it's moderately easy, so what I'm doing is not an impossible situation to recreate by a long shot. In fact, it's pretty easy to replicate. We'll start with Sleeper Simulant. I was able to get off 9 shots in the allotted time, although the 9th shot was right as he started the critical event. 9 shots times 42,817 damage per shot gives us 385,353 total damage over that time. We're not going to be too concerned with DPS at the moment, since we have a 20-second window to do as much damage as possible. We just want to maximize our damage while we can, and we'll talk simulated DPS later, although for Sleeper Simulant, it's not really simulated. Gjallarhorn is up next. I was able to very easily get off all 6 of my rockets and have time left over. Now, Gjallarhorn has some issues in general, and on this fight specifically. See, when fired rapidly, Gjallarhorn Wolfpack rounds sometimes just don't work. Sometimes you'll only have a few rounds, sometimes you'll get barely any. It is rare to get both rockets to provide full damage, at least on a single target. Usually the second rocket will be problematic. This isn't just a Vasek issue, although the Vasek specific issue is the fact that he is positioned in a way where Gjallarhorn Wolfpack rounds can hit things that are immune. So, to verify actual Gjallarhorn damage, I shot until I got one that was mostly problem-free. There are approximately 23 Wolfpack rounds per Gjallarhorn rocket, at least that's what I was able to determine while trying to count the difficult-to-count Wolfpack rounds. I shot one rocket, then had my entire team die, and saw that I did 53,086 damage with 22 Wolfpack rounds hitting and one not. I wanted to verify that, so I scrolled over the clip and got the following information. The Gjallarhorn rocket did 21,552 explosion damage, plus 6,785 impact damage, plus approximately 21 Wolfpack rounds either doing 1,397 damage or 998 damage per round. 6 of them dealt 1,397 damage, the rest 998, which would mean our damage is only 51,689. However, if we add another 1,397 Wolfpack rounds, we get the exact damage that the game told us. So it's very, very possible that I just missed a Wolfpack round while doing my counting, considering how obnoxious it is to try to count all the individual rounds. We also had one thing go immune, which I assumed to be a Wolfpack round, so we'll say that's another 1,000 damage tacked on, although it's not super important for the test, knowing the numbers that I know right now. So that 53 to 54,000 damage is the ideal Gjallarhorn quote-unquote perfect rocket. Simply put, You will not get that to happen for every single rocket, like I said. If you fire the weapon slow enough, then yes, you will get perfect rockets each time, but that is not what people do. Most people fire 2 rockets back to back as fast as they possibly can, typically only looking out to make sure that they don't accidentally blow themselves up. Then immediately shove more rockets into the rocket launcher and then continue to shoot as fast as possible. The first rocket works fine, the second generally ends up doing less damage because of the lack of Wolfpack rounds because you're firing so quickly. At least, that is the theory. For the sake of argument, let's say we have ideal conditions. 53,086 damage per rocket, 6 rockets, that's 318,516 total damage. So we're behind by 66,837 damage if we get a perfect volley for every single rocket, which we won't. Your volleys will probably end up like mine do in these clips, doing in between 250 and 290,000 total damage, so we can be up to 100,000 damage behind or more depending on your luck. Now obviously you're not going to just stop shooting because you ran out of rockets, right? You're going to pull out that sniper and you're going to keep shooting. So I did a test of that as well, using a 376 light sniper because it's the highest thing that I had. So we do some more G-horn spam, and as soon as I'm done with my rockets, I immediately take out my sniper to snipe. I was able to pop another 83,000 damage in snipes into Vasek, that's 4 shots, before I had to start running, including a luck in the chamber crit. So let's see a couple of these tests in practice. Here I'm firing G-horn until I run out, then switch to snipes and I get 4 shots off. I miss 1, but will incorporate that damage into the final damage screen to compensate. In total, I end up with about 330,000 damage when we factor in the missed snipe, well short of that 385 that Sleeper was able to do. Even if I missed a Sleeper shot completely, Sleeper would still win. Even if I missed a bunch of crits, Sleeper would still win. Here's another example. Same thing happens, 6 G-horn, 4 snipe, except this time I end up with 359,372 damage, a 30,000 damage improvement that still does not beat the Sleeper Simulant. Now, I rewrote this video. The original version had an entire section on actual damage per second instead of just total damage over a specific time. You might say, well, isn't that what DPS is? Damage over a certain amount of time? Well, yes, but DPS fluctuates wildly every single second. You could be doing 45,000 DPS at one moment, but as soon as you start to reload, you're doing 0. I was able to chart out a line graph of what perfect DPS on both Sleeper and G-horn would look like over a 20-second period. Both weapons spike up towards the beginning, which is normal, but over time start to even out. There are plenty of points during the damage phase where one weapon is doing more DPS than the other, ultimately depending on when you're reloading versus when you're firing. G-horn seems like it's on top more, but this chart assumes that each shot is doing that perfect 54,000 damage per shot, which we now know is not true. It almost ends up being about 80 to 90,000 per 2 rockets. So let's try to compensate for what we believe to be the actual damage. Here's a chart where we say that each 2 G-horn rockets are doing about 92,000 damage based off of a run that I had where I did 276,000 damage with 6 G-horn rockets, no sniping. Now we can see that towards the end, Sleeper starts to hang out on top of the chart a little bit more than it did in the original graph, aka doing higher DPS compared to G-horn. We'll take a quick look at Axis as well, but Axis ends up being in a similar spot as Vasek. Axis has an unfortunate effect where you don't know where you'll be DPSing from until he teleports, so I try to go as quickly and as reasonably as possible. I waited until the 3rd teleport before I started damage. Here's a clip where I end up with 339,000 damage with a missed snipe, so we'll just bump that up to an even 360,000. But the next example that I have, our damage plummets despite doing the same exact thing, 6 G-horns and 4 snipes. I end up with 301,000 damage with a missed snipe, bringing that up to about 320,000. If we whip out the Sleeper Simulant using the same rules, I pop 9 shots onto Axis' head and end up with 374,328 damage when getting all crits. Ignore the number at the end of the clip because I threw a Siva charge. And if I were faster, I could have maybe gotten in a 10th shot provided I was wearing the armor bonus. Alright, so what does all this mean? It means that in a controlled environment, such as something like Vasek or Axis, Sleeper Simulant is a higher risk, higher reward weapon to use for damage purposes. It relies on precision, as missing shots is really bad with a weapon like Sleeper. Gjallarhorn is much more reliable in terms of actually planting damage on the boss, but you won't be doing as much damage as you possibly could be if you're looking to go all out with min-maxing your damage. Of course, you can use either one and be totally fine. There is no issue there. The thing that Sleeper also has going for it is that you can get more than 9 shots if you get ammo bonuses. Although with such tight damage windows, it is often tough to fully take advantage of more than 9 shots, at least in the raid. Outside of the raid, like in strikes, you can take advantage of the increased ammo much more if you have those kind of bonuses. So, that's what I got for you guys right now for the Sleeper versus Gjallarhorn debate. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which one that you use. Gjallarhorn is more reliable, Sleeper has higher potential damage given the time limits within the raid. When not in the raid, it also really doesn't matter which one you use, just use whichever one you find more fun or whichever ends up being more practical for the situation that you'll be in. You probably don't want to take out a bunch of ads with Sleeper Simulant, but maybe stash the Gjallarhorn when there's thrall everywhere so you don't blow yourself up. We aren't closing the book on weapon damage comparisons just yet. There are still plenty of weapons out there, Outbreak Prime, Black Spindle, so I'd like to continue to look into those weapons to see which are the best. If you enjoyed this video, a positive rating would be greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching and suffering through all of my math, and I will see you next time.